everybody. Welcome once again to another edition of the EDP podcast, where we're helping you be prepared for life's everyday obstacles. I hope you bear with me. I'm in a little bit of pain from an exercise, but we're going to try to push through this because I'm that dedicated for you. I am joined, as always, by Mr. Zan. How you doing, sir?
Hey, doing good. Not exercising like you, so that's one thing you got up on me.
Well, my wife's trying to get in good shape, so she's bringing me around. And, to be honest with you, I actually enjoy it. And speaking of that, in case you missed it, we actually have our own podcast where I sat down with one of Southwest Missouri's top personal trainers, and we go over some fitness stuff. So it's in our podcast, kind of backlog there, so be sure to check that out. Some really good info there to get started. You don't always end up in pain like I am. It can happen, but just start slow and you'll be fine.
It is a very important aspect, though, because, even if your cardio is not up, my cardio is not up, but I've been dropping weight by changing my diet and not eating, McDonald's every single day and sugary drinks every single day, which is just, even that aspect of fitness is really underrated as far as preparedness goes on so many different levels.
Oh, absolutely. We could go back into that sometime. But today, now that I've already gone off on the tangent, today we're going to do something completely different, and we're going to talk about some prepper myths. And I'm sure everybody listening has heard more than a few of the ones we're going to cover, and you could probably add a bunch. But before we get too far into it, be sure to check us out at everydaypreparedness.net. That's the website we have right now. Be sure to check it out. A lot of cool info. We're going to get some reviews up, like video reviews and stuff like that. So there's going to be some cool stuff coming on. You can send us an email at edpreparedness@gmail.com. That's a really good way to get a hold of us. If you have any questions, show topics, anything you want to see is covered, hear is covered, whatever, however you want to say it. Be sure to check us out. That's edpreparedness@gmail.com. We're also on Facebook. The Facebook's been growing really well here lately. I'm actually really impressed. It started out a little slow, but it's going pretty well. And that's one of the best places to get a hold of us. And, be sure to interact with us. Like the page, share the page, comment. We're going to try and create a community. You can do that at facebook.com/edprepare. That is, again, facebook.com/edprepare. And we're also on Twitter. Twitter's fun. It's a blast. Zan usually takes care of that. He's always doing a good job. And that is at edprepare. Again, on Twitter, that is at edprepare. We're on YouTube. Again, you just have to check us out. That's probably where you're checking this out. That's pretty cool. We're going to look at doing some other things, too, coming up in the future, but we haven't got all the plans lined out yet. So as far as that goes, well, what do you think, Zan? Prepper myths.
Oh, there's so many. We've kind of tried to narrow it down today to kind of the ones you hear in mass media, or not even mass media, just the stereotypes, I suppose, that would go along with all this stuff from, being a mall ninja, armchair militia member, to the bunker guy, to end of the world zombie guy. There's just so many different avenues we could go with this, but I think we tried to narrow it down pretty good today.
Yeah, I think we did a good job on this, because like you said, doing research and stuff, there's so many out there. It's almost ridiculous.
Yeah.
Of course, part of that's because they think everybody, you hear the word prepper and you instantly think to like doomsday prepper and running around with a gas mask and
exactly,
stuff like that. And that's not what we're about here. And in all honesty, I don't know a whole lot of people in the prepping community that are like that. I'm sure they're out there.
Yeah, and you see them on a lot of the, media coverage on this stuff. Like, I don't know if you remember, but locally here we had a prepper expo several months ago. And there were a lot of people that had the tables there, the little vendors, I guess is what you would call them.
Yeah.
And they were selling a lot of that kind of stuff. Now, there was a lot of really practical vendors there, too. But, there's still people out there that are just totally into the doomsday prepper stuff. And, I'm not going to lie, some of that stuff is pretty smart, and it would be nice. But it's just so many things that go into that make it, I guess, not very feasible for the average person, and that's what we're here for, the average person.
Oh, exactly. And a lot of that, kind of doomsday stuff, again, I've said it numerous times, if I look out my window and see a mushroom cloud, 25 years of food, honestly, isn't probably going to do a lot for me. It's just, you know what I mean? I'm not worried about trying to survive the apocalypse. And, that's one of my first myths I have written down, so we'll just go right into it. One of the big myths you always hear is that, the end of the world as we know it. Life is going to end. Well, yeah, it probably will sometime. I don't care. At the very least, sometime, I think it's like 2 or 3 billion years from now, our sun is going to grow into like a red giant and eat us.
Yeah.
What the hell are you going to do? Are you going to prep and build a spaceship in that missile silo?
You would be surprised, I bet.
Well, that's true. I say that. And there's probably people already have it done. But, I mean, honestly, that's one of the big things you hear is, oh, you're just one of those conspiracy freaks who, you think the world's going to end, the government's taking over. Well, you know what? That's not what we're about here. There's some truth to the whole, possibility of government takeovers and stuff like that. But you know what? As far as prepping goes, that's not what we're about here.
No, I think there's a lot of things that go into the basics of preparedness that could apply if a situation like that was to arise, be it minor or major. But on an everyday situation, I mean, the biggest things we're having to worry about are tornadoes, job loss, keeping healthy, keeping your car running right, just everyday stuff like that,
Yeah, I mean, if, maybe this is just me, but whenever I think of, prepping for the apocalypse and all stuff like that, do I honestly think I'm going to be able to stay at my house with my 6 million guns and 50, million rounds of ammunition and defend myself against armies?
Yeah, that's a great point. I think a lot of people do think that. I've seen specific shows similar to Doomsday Preppers where there is, a pretty fortified area, but there's 2 of them or 3 of them, and they're like, oh, I've got 500 guns and I'm a sharpshooter and all this stuff. Well, there's 3 of you, and like you said, what are you going to do against an army?
Well, right, and they have these things called drones.
Yeah, no kidding.
And I mean, go on YouTube and watch them.
And nukes and atomic bombs and tanks and
right. And
it's just this fantasy land that so many of them live in.
Exactly, because I'm sorry, I'm not. You may be, as important as all that. I'm not near as important. If they get any resistance coming down the road by my house, they're just going to drop a bomb. Yeah. They're not going to bother sending an army, some SWAT team with a black helicopter in the dead of night to come get me. They're just going to drop a bomb. And what am I going to do, with my guns? I'll just sit there and hold them. I mean, I'm not anti-gun at all. I've got many of them. I absolutely love them. I love to shoot, and I believe in our Second Amendment rights. But, I mean, let's be realistic. If everything is fallen to hell, the government's, complete tyranny, and they're just rounding people up, do you honestly think they're going to mess with you and go through the trouble of trying to get you out of your house instead of just blow you up?
And another thing I think of when you put that scenario in perspective is the first thing I'm going to be worried about is looters. I'll call them looters and polluters.
Yep.
Bunch of thugs running around trying to rob you, steal, kill you. That's what I'm more not afraid of, but more concerned about than I would be, like you said, an army coming to, take my gun away, like, 50 of them to just me. And talking about defending against thugs, I mean, that's what you should be doing every day right now, because I don't know about, where you're at listening to this podcast, but I know for, us locally, crime has gone through the roof on all different levels of crime. And really that's, if you're going to talk about guns and self-defense and stuff, that's the first thing you need to worry about, not, taking out an army with your sniper rifle that you paid $1 million for, and now you're in debt.
Yeah, exactly. So that's one of mine on my list, man. What do you got?
I pretty much covered my first one. I'll bring this one up, is that preppers are all right-wing Republican extremists. We talked about that a little bit, but I know you're a lot more of a political guy than me, but I can just tell you firsthand that I've seen a lot of, left-wing people that hate guns and they hate all that stuff, and they are sometimes better preppers than these, quote, right-wing extremists. And I'll even throw Christians in there. We were talking about the end of days that you were talking about. And I think, the true Christians, if you subscribe to that ideology, you would be kind of happy. Does that make sense?
Oh, it does. And that's one thing, from a religious perspective. And I don't know about happy because, I guess, the end of days that's listed in the Bible, it's not exactly a good, peaceful period. So I don't know about being happy, and it is something, that is, I mean, look at your Mormons, they believe in a lot of that stuff's going to happen and everything, and they lead the way in making sure everybody's prepared. I mean, that's like part of their church. So I don't know that I would say they're happy, but a lot of them tend to, I think, get a little overboard, and it does seem to be kind of stereotyped towards that direction. But like you said, there are a lot of left-wing people who don't want the guns and stuff like that, and like you said, they're a lot better prepared. Mainly because they think outside the box. A lot of the people who are your more anti-government type and stuff like that, I don't want to call them anarchists because they're really not. But you know what most people tend to think of as stereotype, like, the Tea Party member, tends to think that they can solve everything with a gun. At least from my perspective, that's what I've seen a lot of. Those people are like, okay, well, if the world does end, the gun is kind of secondary nature. Self-defense and stuff is kind of secondary to being able to eat and have water. So they come up with these really neat ways to ensure that they have food and water. Go ahead.
Talking about the guns real quick, didn't mean to cut you off, but, when I think of maybe an emergency situation, let's use Baltimore, for example. Not too long ago, we had the burning, the riots, all that stuff. Yeah, the first thing I want to do is think about my firearms, and I'm thinking about the one or two that I have and defending my property from gangs of thugs. And a lot of people say, oh, well, that's the government. The government is a gang of thugs. Well, like you said earlier, Brent, they could just bring an army and they could take you out, and it's just a waste of time to even think like that, in my opinion.
No, I agree. I have guns for home defense, like you said, against the roving bands of, looters and polluters, like you said.
Yeah.
But, I have no plans of holding my own against, any sort of military. I think that's a little bit out there.
Right.
But that's just it, back to kind of the main point. It does seem that a lot of the media attention is focused on the kind of right-wing people. And a lot of that's just because they're the ones who subscribe to more, let's just call it kind of conservative, fiscal beliefs, where they want to set some money back and they're not quite as, spending liberally. So they may be prepared. And I think the media tends to play on that a little bit because the media is obviously biased against a more, what's commonly referred to as a right-wing mindset. Is that just me, or do I seem,
No. I guess it depends on which media you're looking at,
That's true. Because most of the mainstream media pretty well sucks, so.
Well, and most of the mainstream media is dominated by, the right-wing Republican media, and then you have little bits here and there that are liberal. But, my question is, where's the libertarians? Where's the anarchists even? There's just no, everybody gets to pick a side, like we've said a million times, and that's just what the media wants to push down your throat, and then that's when you get these conspiracy theorist preppers, or so they're considered, categories,
Yeah, and I wonder sometimes if it's just not because they're also the most vocal. They're the ones that sit there and yell and shout the loudest, so they're obviously the ones that everybody's going to see what's going on over here.
Right.
And, I think it honestly, some of that's kind of given it a bad name. And, but I guess to go back around to the main point again, like you said, there are some left-wing people and there's a lot of libertarian people who do consider prepping a very important part of life. And so it's not just a exclusively right-wing Republican extremist type thing. So, did you have anything else before we move on?
Nope, that was it for that one. What do you got next?
One of the other ones, I mean, we've kind of touched on a couple of these again already, but one of them's needing a fallout bunker, like this huge fallout shelter. I tend to think of like the game, where you're like Fallout, where you're living in a bunker underground.
Right.
And stuff like that. And, the people in the missile silos and stuff. If I had the money to do it and, basically just to throw away, you know what? I might, just because it's kind of a neat thing, to just be like, yeah, that's right. I own a missile silo. What do you got? Yeah, a little house. Ha. But it's not part of my prepping stuff that I believe I need that, if that makes any sense at all.
Yeah, it does. And, I guess I'll kind of go back to the beginnings of this bunker. I am a, complete supporter of storm shelters, which some consider bunkers. So I'll just, if you live in Tornado Alley, which we're kind of in it, but I mean, it doesn't seem like we're getting hit in southwest Missouri on a regular basis. It seems like Oklahoma gets hit every other day.
Right.
So if I lived in Oklahoma, I might invest in one of these doomsday bunkers because they are bigger. You could be more comfortable on a situation that's going to come up more frequently, as opposed to here. I think we could get away with a storm shelter that fits, 2 people, just enough to keep you alive, essentially, but maybe not comfortable. What do you think about that aspect of it? Do you agree or disagree?
No, I agree. Actually, believe it or not, I know somebody that got their house hit here this morning by the
really?
storm. The storm that blew through this morning, and it wasn't even enough to bring up like severe weather alerts on the radio or anything. Thankfully, nobody was hurt or anything. But yeah, I mean, that was something that happened. And yeah, you're right. If, you're living in Oklahoma or something, having a good sized shelter isn't a bad idea. And it's just because that's where you're at. But there again, it's not necessarily a fallout bunker. What was that movie with Brendan Fraser in it that came out like the mid 90s or something where, you know what I'm talking about? Cause it had, one of my favorite actors in the world's in it.
The only thing I could think of is Encino Man. Hey man, you said it.
Awesome. No, that's just awesome. Oh man, I can't.
Oh no, I know what you're talking about now. It came to I don't remember the name of it, but I see like the cover art for it now.
Yeah, and it had like where they had like the fake sunlight and the scenery and stuff like that. I don't see anything like that being a necessary thing. I mean, granted, we weren't raised in, under the shadow of nuclear war, during the Cold War times when it was a very real fear. So maybe, if I was around then, I'd have a little bit different idea. But as far as that goes, like you said, around here, having something like maybe a panic room is great. Having a good safe room, solid concrete, walls and stuff like that, that's great. I don't have any problem with that. Storm shelters, no, that's absolutely fantastic. But to have, like a 2,000 or 3,000 square foot fallout bunker ready for nuclear war, like I said, if I had the millions to throw away to do it and it didn't mean much to me, you bet I would do it just probably for the sheer novelty.
Well, and you got to kind of be smart, I guess, about how you install those, because I'll use this as an example. I used to watch Doomsday Preppers. I actually still like the show if you're watching it as entertainment. Right. And sometimes they do have some pretty cool ideas, and sometimes they don't. Most of the time they don't, or maybe they do, and they're just unrealistic. But I saw this one family that had a safe that it was in their garage, and it kind of went down like maybe 20 or 30 feet underground, and then kind of like ballooned out at the bottom so they could sit in it and, live in it. Not very comfortably, but they could survive. And my first thought was, okay, so let's say, the bombs hit or whatever in their world, and the house gets blown away, and there's still this big concrete slab. As soon as they pull something back and see that there's a hatch door, they're going to open the hatch door and just drop something down in it and blow out whoever's in there.
Right.
So it's completely unrealistic and stupid to do something like that.
Yeah, I agree. Like I said, if I had the money to waste and, wasn't going to miss it, I might have something like that just for the sheer novelty of it. But as far as being like a prepping necessity or something like that, no, I'm sorry. That stuff just, to me, is not even really worth my time. Now, if, storm shelter, that's a different issue. And, even the safe room in the house, that's a little bit different. But there again, you don't have to go into like, a big fallout bunker, I don't think.
No.
So that's another one off mine. What else you got?
Next one I have is that you have to be knowledgeable and well-versed on all firearms and self-defense. Now, I know we both think you should be probably, but you should just be every day for self-defense in general, whether it's learning some form of self-defense, some form of fighting style, or just practicing with firearms. But we said earlier, there's a lot of people who absolutely hate guns that prep on a regular basis. So what's your thoughts on this?
Well, see, I'm actually kind of torn on this one because
yeah, I know it's tough.
It's I love firearms. I really do. They're something I've grown up around since I was a kid and everything. I've shot, most of my entire life. So being well versed in firearms is a fantastic thing, but it does go to the point where, I see this on social media stuff quite a bit actually. where it's like, name this gun and caliber and all that. And you get in this almost like pissing contest in the comment section.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, well, that's this. It shoots this. This is the best round. I would rather have this and this and this and this and this. And it's like, really?
Yeah.
And, like I said, I enjoy firearms. I think they're fantastic. But you have to get what works for you. And once you are, become well-versed in how your gun operates. As far as, being able to pick out what somebody's carrying from 1,000 yards away, okay, I guess if, you're at a trivia show, that's great. And, being able to do it, if that's your livelihood and stuff, that's great. But as far as being a necessary thing, as far as prepping goes, I think there's a lot of prepping stuff between, starting out and getting to that point, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, and I'm just sitting here thinking of all different kinds of self-defense or home defense that you could use makeshift if you absolutely had to. That's better than nothing. I mean, if you had a BB gun or a pellet gun, that's better than nothing. And you don't have to be well-versed on firearms for that. Is that going to, take somebody out if they're robbing your house? No, not necessarily. But sometimes something as simple as just flashing a firearm, even if it's not a real one, can scare people. And in an emergency situation where people are going to be scared, that might be bigger than you think. I've also seen people that can make punji pits and traps and all kinds of cool stuff just out of stuff laying around the house. And that doesn't require anything to do with firearms. I'm with you. I would recommend it. I would recommend it to this day, currently. And you get a good quality one, but don't buy into the snobs that tell you you've got to have this caliber, you got to have this brand, blah blah blah. Get something that is functionable and reliable, and something you can afford, and something you like. And if that's a handgun or if it's a rocket launcher, whatever it is, just and you don't have to have 50 million of them, like you said earlier in the show. What are you going to do with those if you have to leave your house for whatever reason?
Exactly, and that ties into my next one that I had was you don't need a massive arsenal.
Mm-hmm.
You see a lot of pictures and stuff, and I saw a lot when I was doing the research and everything. This is a prepper's, showroom or something, and it has like little cannons and just, all the walls are just lined from floor to ceiling and nothing but, firearms. You don't need that. That's so far from unnecessary. And like you said, if you ever get into a bug out situation, which, bug out stuff is very big in the prepper community. So, okay, you're going to bug out. Are you actually going to lug your, 30, 40, 50 guns with you? I mean, if you can, God bless you. But, for me, it's 2, maybe 3, and that's all I'm going to bother with.
Another interesting thing that I've noticed is it seems like the people who do want to do this are only in a group of like 1 or 2 people. Have you noticed that, or is that maybe just an anomaly on my end?
No, now that you say that, that actually seems kind of true, and that's kind of sad because, if you had an entire community and you had that many guns, well, great, everybody would have one, and, they could help.
Yeah, that's totally different than...
Yeah, but no, I see what you're saying, though, because that does seem to be a little bit of the case, which I guess is kind of weird, but...
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think 1 or 2, is probably in a situation like this enough for anybody. So the only reason you would need to have a whole arsenal is if you really band it together like current day with your community for numerous different reasons. Tornado, maybe you have a neighborhood watch even, something that simple. And that's something that, what's your opinion on neighborhood watch actually?
Honestly, the paranoid part of me doesn't like it. Of course, the part of me that watched Hot Fuzz the other day kind of finds it a little different too. But if you guys haven't seen the movie Hot Fuzz, absolutely check it out. I don't know if you've seen it or not, Zan, but it's absolutely hilarious.
I didn't like it as well as Shaun of the Dead, but it was okay.
Yeah, Shaun of the Dead was a little bit better, but if you're a fan of like 90s action movie cliches, that movie's absolutely amazing and hilarious. But anyway, no, I think it's kind of necessary, and I think it shows. I think it would help to show that we don't need as strong of a police presence as we're told we often need.
Mm-hmm.
And especially whenever you see, kind of some of the problems with the militarization of police and everything, having the neighborhood watch, I'm sorry, you have an 80-year-old woman lives across the street. You're not doing anything without her knowing and telling like 6 people.
Right.
Neighborhood watch or not, those little old ladies know everything that's going on. And so I think it can be a very, very good thing, but I think it kind of can depend on the community.
Yeah, and then you have like the whole George Zimmerman thing where, you do get somebody that maybe patrols the area or something, but is real trigger happy and just wants to show off their new gun they got, so they're going to go find somebody that they think is doing something wrong. Whether they are or aren't, that's beside the point. And they're just, start showing their guns off and maybe even shooting the people. So I think it's kind of good and bad. I mean, I think it's good. Even if let's just say you had a neighborhood watchman that was completely unarmed, no weapons whatsoever. I think that would be awesome just to have somebody to pay attention, because there's parts throughout the day where I'll be driving home or driving somewhere and I'll see, really small children out playing outside with nobody else around. And if they were to get abducted, then, that whose fault is that? It would be everybody's for not at least keeping an eye on them every now and then,
Right. Yeah. No, I see it. And that's what I was saying. It can be very useful depending on the community. Sometimes I could see where it would be a bad thing. But, anytime you can get kind of, and if there's any policeman watching the show, this is going to sound a little bit worse than I mean it, and I'll explain it in a little bit. But if you can show that you don't need the violence of government there at all times, that, you can kind of police your own neighborhood and then bring them in only when necessary, I think that's absolutely a great thing.
Yeah.
And, what I mean by violence of government is, I'm sorry, government is force. I don't care. I don't want to get into a big political diatribe here or anything, but government is force and cops are members of that government. They're there to enforce. They're not there to protect your lives, despite what they say. The Supreme Court says otherwise. They are there to enforce laws, and enforcement is an act of violence because it is, an act of aggression basically against you and whatever you're doing. Now that may or may not be deserved, but so whenever you could have a neighborhood watch that can help keep some of that a little bit out, more on the periphery, I think that's always a good thing.
Hey, I do want to throw one in real quick since we were talking about Shaun of the Dead. Is the zombie preparedness movement. Now, you can kind of go a couple different ways with this. Number one, in my opinion, if it takes zombies or killer clowns or running of the bulls or George W. Bush or JFK's ghost or whatever it takes for you to prep, just do it. I mean, that's great. If you want to get prepared for the zombie apocalypse, I would say there's a decent chance that much preparedness, that level, is better than none, which is what the average person is doing nowadays. So if that's what you think, that's fine. Now, honestly, that's not really the case. I've heard that there could actually be a zombie-type apocalypse one of two different ways. We've seen the bath salts where people go nuts and chew off people's faces. And then I've heard there's different strands of viruses that actually exist that will put a person into a zombie-like state. Now, both of those being said, nobody's raising from the dead, nobody's eating brains, none of that stuff. So what's your take on that? Because I know it's still a really popular thing, especially with like Walking Dead and a lot of pop culture stuff.
I say if that's what it takes, go for it. I'm like you on that. I really am. I don't personally understand the whole zombie thing. Like I said, I like Shaun of the Dead. I liked a couple of the other movies. But as far as the whole scene, I don't understand it. I really don't. I never have. It's just something that I guess it goes over my head on, So, but no, if that's what it takes to get you to where you are thinking about preparing and everything, yeah, that's great. Go for it. Cause, you're going to be looking for the exact same type stuff, and if that's what it takes, it's more of just, kind of the facade you put on what you're actually doing. I mean, I'm sure there's people out there who actually believe zombies are going to rise from the dead, a la Resident Evil or something.
Well, and speaking of that, I think it's one thing it's doing that is awesome is you have seen a lot of younger people and kids start preparing because they've seen Walking Dead, they've read the comics, they've played Resident Evil, they play these zombie survival games, and all of a sudden they think they kind of think that stuff could happen, and maybe that's actually a good thing. I mean, I've seen several shows where you had early teens, 14, 15, 13, those age kids with their school backpack, and they've got, the basic pocket knife in there, and they got a flashlight and all this stuff, and I'm like, I don't agree with what they're doing as far as like why they're doing it, but that's actually really great to see younger kids into something like that.
No, like I said, yeah, whatever it takes to get them started. I mean, if that's what it takes, then you know what? Let's do it. Let's go with it. You know, I don't have to enjoy it. I can appreciate what it's helping do. So, yeah. So let's get into another one I have here on my list, and it kind of ties in with what we've been talking about. And that is basically, I've kind of got this broke down two different ways, but it's basically the idea that having gear trumps training. And I mean, I know we kind of talked about the firearm stuff, but what I'm kind of getting at with this is more like you see your mall ninjas that have to have everything that's all tactical. You know, they've got these fancy vests, they've got all these like 6,000 different things on their AR where it weighs like, you know, I don't know, 60 pounds.
Yeah.
And, you know, stuff like that. And a lot of them don't seem to actually know how to use it. They've seen a couple videos. And, you know, they can go to the range and stuff like that. But I think there's too much of a mall ninja thing. And that's something I think training will always beat having a whole lot of gear. Does that seem weird, or am I way off base? Or
No, I totally agree. And I think for me, this really goes back to the guns because I know there's so many people that think they have to have all these guns. And sometimes they don't even have time to shoot. And that's me. I don't own that many because I don't have time to shoot. I can't afford to go buy ammo. And then using the gear that you were talking about, I have what I need. You know, I don't need, you know, I have a couple of knives that I keep on me. I don't have 50. I've got, you know, 20 feet of paracord on me. I don't have 1,600 wraps of it. You know, I don't have a parachute on me at all times. I don't have combat boots. I don't have tactical shorts over my tactical pants. You know, it's just, I don't have 25 million carabiners hanging around with 50 water bottles. And, you know, I'm exaggerating, but, like, this stuff is true. You see these people that at conventions on the internet doing reviews on YouTube, you know, on Doomsday Preppers that are just, they have all of this stuff that they've spent all this money on, and some even going into massive amounts of debt with combined of what's on their person and their bug-out vehicle and their bug-out bunker and all of the stuff they've done to their house. And sometimes it puts them in financial ruin for something that may not even happen when they should have been being prepared financially, because that's a pitfall in itself. So, yeah, I mean, I see that stuff all the time, and, you know, I'm constantly asked by people that are just getting into it, you know, oh, how many knives do I need? How many guns do I need? And I'm like, well, how much water do you have stored? Do you have a get-home bag? You know, what do you keep on you? Do you even keep a pocket knife or a pair of scissors or anything on you, you know?
No, absolutely. And, you know, I've talked about this a little bit before, I think, but I took a knife fighting seminar with a guy who did Filipino martial arts. At one time, during the course of the seminar, we got to talking, and at one time he carried, I think it was 23 knives on him at any one time. And, you know, to me and you and everything, that sounds a little bit excessive. Why do I ever need 23 knives for? Well, the difference is he actually had the training to know where and why to have the knives in the locations he did and how to use them from that spot. So, right. You know, that's a case of I don't need 23 knives on me, because what am I going to do with it? I mean, they're just going to hang around and bug the crap out of me. Yeah. He had the training, you know, and it was the training first over the gear. And, you know, that's kind of, I guess that's a little weird example of what I was talking about. But, you know, that's something that, you know, you see a lot of people, like I said, there's a couple videos online, I'll see if I can find them and share them, that are just hilarious. And, you know, where the guy's got a tactical water bottle and a tactical this and a tactical that and a tactical this. And it's absolutely hilarious because you see people like that. And it actually drives me nuts. I mean, I guess it's not a myth, but so much, because there is the mall ninjas out there, and, you know, I just say watch out for them.
And there are also videos out there of people that are like, you know, today I'm going to show you how to do a tactical roll, and they've been down and they're so fat that they fall over and they can't move, but yet they've got all this tactical gear on. And then there's videos of these guys trying to show you how much of a sharpshooter they are, and they're shooting themselves. So, I mean, it's just, you know, quit trying to be cool. Really, that's all I got to say. You know, I love tactical pants, but not because I'm trying to be cool. I like all the pockets because I carry a lot of stuff that's not a lot of gear. It's a lot of practical stuff. So I like tactical pants. I like tactical belts. You know, I like a good holster. I like good knives, but that doesn't mean I have tons of them. Number one, I don't need it. Number two, I don't want to spend the money on it. So.
Yep. All right. So what else you got?
We touched a little bit on this, but I'll get back into it, and that's that to be prepared, you have to completely believe and your life revolve around conspiracy theories. And there are some conspiracy theories that are actually truth, and then there are stuff that's so far off base. So I'll kind of put you on the spot here.
Uh-oh.
Can you give an example of a conspiracy theory that maybe people would prepare for that could happen, and then one that's just so far off base that it's ridiculous?
Oh man, I don't know, because I love conspiracy theories, but I find myself finding a lot of them to be ridiculous anymore. Even some that I kind of used to believe in and everything are almost ridiculous anymore. So one to me that, oh man, that's actually really tough. Now you put me on the spot. Thanks, man.
Yeah, I know. I've just tried, because I'm thinking of some too. I mean, it's tough, but we've got to show everybody that maybe some of these there's some truth to, and some of them are so far off base. I mean,
some of them, well, one that's actually proven true, and this is a little bit weird, I guess, but is just you see a lot of stories online coming out now of police using what's called like Stingray, I believe. And they're able to do warrantless searches of your electronic devices.
Right, yeah.
And, a couple years ago, before the Snowden revelations and stuff like that, if you had mentioned that cops could do that, people would have just called you a conspiracy nutter. They would ask where your tinfoil hat was and everything else. And now it's something that they're doing it, and they know they're doing it. It's been proven that these cops are doing it, and technically it is illegal, but because the way a lot of the laws are written, they can get around some of it. And, I mean, there's not a whole lot of ways other than, traveling with your electronic devices in like a Faraday cage, to get around that. But, that is one thing that you do have to watch out for, is stuff like that. And that was a conspiracy theory that turned out to be true. Now, one that I don't know is necessarily true, I guess, is there again, man, that's hard, because there's so many of them that are weird, I guess. Well, do you have any? Well,
I've got one that has actually happened, and that's the warrantless searches and raids on people's property.
Yeah.
I mean, we've seen that countless times where they will raid and take, illegal milk, or like in Katrina, they raided people's houses and took all their firearms, or during the Boston bombing, they'd kick people's doors down and raid the house looking for the bomber. And I don't care what you say, none of that stuff is legal. You cannot, without a warrant, bust through somebody's house and just take whatever they want. That is stealing.
Yep.
And there was a conspiracy theory years ago that came true, And then maybe one that I've really just, I shake my head at, even though you see these videos that I think they're fake, and that's the FEMA camps.
Right.
I don't know how you feel about it. I think if there is a major disaster, I don't think that FEMA is big enough to be able to handle all these situations all at one time and be able to round up everybody. I mean, come on, we can't even get people to, not that, another issue for another day, but they can't even get everybody to pay their taxes. So how are they going to round them up physically? That many people, I don't know.
I don't know. It sounds to me like you're kind of becoming a disinformation agent there, Zan. How did they get to you?
I don't know.
I swear. It was money, wasn't it? They paid you off.
I wish somebody paid me.
No, I agree, honestly. The FEMA camp thing's always kind of bugged me, because you hear a lot of people, they're like, oh, they're there, they're real, they're this, they're that. And then you see other people go to these same locations, and it's something completely different.
Mm-hmm.
And, even your, what's the other big one in a lot of the circles right now? And that's HARP, the
yeah.
HARH.
The weather controlling stuff.
Yeah, it's weather control, it's an earthquake device, it's a laser beam from space, it's, this or that or the other thing. I'm sure the government does all sorts of bad, nasty stuff that we really wish they wouldn't do. and that we probably don't want to know that they're doing. But until I see some hard evidence of either of those from independent sources who are not directly profiting from pushing those theories, I'm going to have a very hard time believing them. So
yeah, that's all I've got on the conspiracy theories. I mean, you just have to kind of, I guess going back to a long time ago, staying aware, just knowing what could be true, what's really false. Even, let's say this HAARP thing is real. What are you going to do about it?
Right.
You can't do anything about it, so what's the point in even worrying about it? I would rather make sure that my bank account has a decent amount in it over what's going to happen to the Earth. I mean, honestly, because if it's something that big, like you said earlier, just walk to the cloud.
Right, yeah. Yeah, I agree. So to change it up and go a completely kind of different direction, the last one I have on my list is that one of the big myths, and this is more of just kind of a generalization I think a lot of people have, is that prepping is way too expensive to do.
Mm-hmm.
And, and part of that comes from the other myths that we've talked about, where people have the fallout bunkers, the massive arsenal, the, 8,000 years of food stored away. And that's not really what prepping is about, at least not to me. And, it's something that if you're going to prep, you have to figure out a way to start small. And that's something I know we've preached about on almost every single podcast, I think, is that, you just start that first step and you just build on it, and just however small steps, maybe all you can do is buy an extra can of corn. Well, buy one extra can of corn every time you go to the store. That is prepping, and that's not an expensive way to start. I know that's, Zan and I both talked about how whenever we kind of started, it was, oh man, we have to get this, we have to get this, we have to get this. We ended up spending way too much money, and we made a lot of mistakes buying this stuff, and we realized we didn't need this stuff. And then it kind of finally, at least on me, it finally dawned on me. It's like, hey, you know what? I don't have to spend $400 at the grocery store for, creamed corn. I can do this, every time we go shopping at a little bit and not put myself in financial jeopardy.
So the thing I will add on that is, a big thing in the prepper community is I'm going to live off the land, Yep. There are people right now that are doing that don't have jobs. They don't have any income to speak of, and they really do live off the land. They grow their own food. They raise their own livestock. They can their own food. They store their own water. They capture rainwater. They live off of their little plantation, if you will, and just they prepare. I mean, that is preparing, and maybe it's mental preparing by getting off the grid and not dealing with the crap that 99% of America has to deal with, the 9-to-5 job you're stuck with because you're knee-deep in debt and you can't get out. I mean, that's another aspect of just being able to prepare with nothing, essentially, but other than your mind and skills that you picked up. And that's another thing that, doesn't necessarily cost a lot of money, is learning skills.
Yep. And, I mean, I'll just be honest, that's my dream. At the end of my prepping, I do have a dream where I am completely powered by solar, wind, or whatever. I don't even have to hook up to the electrical grid and pay whatever electrical company wants to charge me because, they were granted a monopoly by the government, which is a whole different topic that makes my eyes bleed. But, I want to get off that. I want to be able to eat out of my garden and do this stuff and not have to not be beholden to anybody or anything. And I don't have to have a job. I don't have to have money because everything is, just continuously perpetuates itself into survival and to further prepping on later on. And that's what I look forward to. I mean, that, you can call it whatever you want, but that is my dream at the end of, it's my bucket at the end of the rainbow. And that's what I really want to do now that I've kind of started and seen that you actually can do some of that stuff. Maybe that's weird. I don't know.
No, I want to transition that discussion, though, into my last thing, and where, this could go both ways. And that's that preppers are obsessed with prepping and they don't think about anything else in their lives and they have no life. So let's look at this one of two ways. Or actually, we can't look at it two ways. The first would be what you just said. You would be constantly working on your little plot of land that, you have wherever. And you're constantly prepping that land because that's just what you do. If you're going to survive, you have to live off the land. you've got to plant the food, you got to raise the livestock, you got to cut the wood, all that stuff, and make sure your panels are up, or like you said, the wind, water, whatever you're going to use. So that can turn into an obsession because that is your life. However, do you choose that life, or do you choose this ridiculous grinding 9-to-5 life that you work 40 hours plus a week to come home and enjoy next to nothing because you spend all your time doing this? The thing is, if you're on your property working your butt off, living, then you're going to have more time because you're on your property. You don't ever have to leave, and you can enjoy all the little things. And maybe it's just because I'm getting old, but I love watching animals and birds, and I love working outside. And I'm sorry that if that's what I like to do, that doesn't mean I get to go buy a 100-inch LCD TV and the brand new iPods and iPads and brand new phones. Heck, I don't even use my phone very much. So, that's just perspective. Now, let's flip it to another perspective. And, you can prep if you're in a major city or if you live off the grid. It doesn't matter. But nobody's saying you have to live off the grid and be obsessed with it either. Prime example is me. I don't live off the grid. I try to keep my lights and stuff shut off because I don't like to use electricity, but that's because I don't want to pay for it because I'm a cheapskate.
Right.
But we can both vouch for this, and I'm going to throw cheap plugs in here. One of my favorite things to do is listen to music. And speaking of that, we have a music website, thevaultreviews.com. If you guys really like music, go there, and we've got all kinds of stuff there. So I really like music. I also like to read comic books. I like to read regular books, nonfiction books. And I like pro wrestling. And I like to play video games every now and then. I like to watch a movie every now and then. None of that is in the minds of these people who think, you need to prep 24/7, or the media who thinks that that's all these people do. You do have to take time, and it actually does become a fun hobby at a point. And it continues to be a fun hobby because you're constantly evolving your preps, but it's not all we do. So where do you stand on both of those situations?
Well, like I said, my dream is to eventually have my little plot of land where I don't have to pay for electricity. I don't have to pay for this or that. But, that's kind of a pipe dream right now. And that's, something for whenever I'm older, for whenever I retire. And like I said, I don't like the idea of doing the little daily 9-to-5 grind where I am punching a time clock for somebody else, helping make them rich while I'm barely getting by. And to me, it's more of it's actually less about prepping, I guess, per se, for me, as it is about kind of getting out of the hamster wheel, so to speak.
Yes, that's exactly right.
And I don't want to be caught up in, oh my God, I have to have this TV, I have to have this, I have to have that. I don't want to be where I have to have things.
Right. And
at least not things that aren't necessary for survival or for, stuff like that. I don't, I'm not a big keeping up with the Joneses type person. I like buying nice stuff if I'm going to spend my money, just because I hate spending money. But at the same time, I'm not trying to keep up with everybody else. And my pipe dream really reflects that. I would like to get to the point where it's not even necessarily about prepping. It would be almost to the point where if everything did collapse, if the government collapsed, economic collapse, whatever, it wouldn't affect my life at all.
Right.
Because what am I going to do? Well, I don't get power from them. Okay, I get my own power. I might miss the daily newspaper or news report or the next movie coming out. But those are things that aren't really major impacts on my life. And I think a lot of people, whenever they get obsessed with prepping, they're almost worried about losing those things as opposed to the things that really matters. And if I could get where, I can spend all day with my family, with my dogs, that means more to me than driving to work for an hour a day.
Right. I'll use a prime example, and Brent, you know this. I was talking about music and comics and stuff. I love collecting that stuff, and I actually do read and listen to the music as much as I can, so it's not something I just accumulate and then let it sit there, you know what I mean?
Right.
So what it boils down to is if I was in a situation where I could stay at home, I could garden, I could take care of all necessary business and be prepared and live a healthy life, but maybe I could not buy another single piece of music or another comic book, I would be perfectly fine with that.
Yep.
So you can have cool stuff, but you don't have to have this mindset that you need to consume 24/7, whether it's stuff or food or keeping up with the Joneses with whatever. I mean, you do not have to be in that consumer mindset. That's one of the biggest things you're going to have to break, I think, before you even get this far into preparedness. So.
Yeah, I agree. And, I mean, that's where I want to get to, is where I don't worry about any of that stuff. And that's, right. That's my goal and my hope and my prayers, to be honest with you. So that's about all I've got as far as myths go. Do you have anything else to add?
I'm sure we're missing some, but I think we've really hit the main points tonight.
Yeah. All right. Well, with that, before we close the show, again, check out our website. It's everydaypreparedness.net. Like I said, we're going to be posting a couple of reviews. I know I've got a holster review that's coming up, and I don't know if Zan's got anything else right now on the radar. He's been kind of busy with a bunch of stuff. We also got the email, which is edpreparedness@gmail.com. That's a great way to get a hold of us. Show topics. Maybe you have an idea. Maybe you've heard a myth and you want to kind of, talk about it. Be sure to send us one out. Again, that's edpreparedness@gmail.com. Facebook's great. It's been growing fantastically. Thank you guys for helping with that, those who have and everything. Be sure to continue liking, sharing stuff and everything. We continue to grow and continue getting this content out there, because once we get to a certain point, we have a lot of ideas for stuff we want to do, but we have to kind of get up to a certain point where we can actually do it, because right now we're doing this basically just the money we can dig out of our pockets, honestly.
And the time. It's very, very hard to get the time to do this.
Yeah, it really is, because, we're making literally zero on all of this stuff, and we're doing this because we absolutely love it and we believe in this stuff.
And we're essentially making zero in life too, so.
Right, yeah. And so, we've got jobs and everything with this, so, let's get this kind of growing and everything and build the community that we're hoping to. Another good place for that is, I guess I should give you the Facebook address, huh? That's facebook.com/edprepare. That's great. Twitter's, doing pretty well too at edprepare. That's for Twitter. That is @edprepare. And we're also on YouTube, which is probably where you're checking this out. And like I said, if we can get this growing, we get the subscriptions on YouTube and everything up, we've got a lot of angles we're wanting to go to try to get some more content out, maybe even do some premium content eventually for people. But like I said, we've got to, kind of get this grown up a little bit more, and it's going in the right direction. It's going well. Let's just try to keep the momentum going. That's about all I've got. Zan, do you have anything to add at all?
If you like the show, go back and listen to all the past shows. We've got them on the website at everydaypreparedness.net and, of course, YouTube. Share with all of your friends if there's anybody even remotely into this, whether they're into zombies or whether they hate the government or whatever. If they're into preparedness or anything, please share all this information you can with them. So like you said, Brent, we can keep growing the community.
All right. Well, if that's all you've got, that's all I've got. So with that, I guess everybody keep preparing and stay safe.
Yeah.